The wind carried death across the mountains that January morning in 1878, and Nathan Emerson saw her footprints in the snow before he saw the woman herself. Small bare feet leaving pink traces against the white expanse that stretched between the pine trees like a frozen sea. He had been tracking an elk for the better part of 3 hours, his breath forming clouds in the crystalline air, when those impossible prints crossed his path and made him forget everything, except the fact that someone was going to die out here if he did not find them soon. Nathan stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders broad enough to block a doorway and arms thick with muscle earned from years of swinging an axe and hauling timber down mountainsides. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord that had seen better days, and his beard was full but kept trimmed enough to stay out of his way. He had lived in these mountains outside Beaver, Utah, for the past 5 years, preferring the company of wind and wildlife to the noise and demands of town life. But even a man who chose solitude over society could not turn his back on another human being in distress. He followed the tracks at a run, his heavy boots crunching through the snow, his rifle slung across his back, and his heart pounding harder than it should have from mere exertion. The prints grew more erratic, stumbling now, and he could see where she had fallen twice, the imprint of her body in the snow like a grave waiting to be filled. The temperature was dropping as the sun climbed higher, which made no sense to most people but was the truth of winter mornings in the mountains. It would be 10 below zero before noon. When he finally spotted her, she was still moving, which surprised him. She wore a thin cotton dress that might have been yellow once but was now gray with dirt and wear, and her arms were wrapped around herself in the universal gesture of someone trying to hold their own body together through sheer will. Her hair was dark and hung in tangled waves past her shoulders, and even from a distance he could see that her lips had gone blue. "Hey," he called out, his voice booming across the silence like a gunshot. "Stop moving. You hear me? Stop." She turned, and he saw her face fully for the first time. Young, maybe 22 or 23, with high cheekbones and dark eyes that were starting to glaze over with the peculiar confusion that came before freezing to death. She looked at him like she was not entirely sure he was real, and then her knees buckled. Nathan covered the last 50 yards between them in seconds, catching her before she hit the ground. She weighed nothing, all bones and cold skin, and up close he could see the bruises on her arms and the way her feet were bleeding, leaving those pink prints he had followed. Frostbite had already started to turn her toes a dangerous white. "I've got you," he said, his voice gentler now. "You are going to be all right. Do you hear me? You are going to be all right." She did not respond, just stared up at him with those dark eyes that seemed to be looking at something far beyond the present moment. Her whole body was shaking so hard he could feel it through his heavy coat. Without wasting another second, Nathan set her down long enough to pull off his boots. They were good boots, made from elk hide and lined with rabbit fur, and they had kept his feet warm through 3 hard winters. He worked them onto her frozen feet as gently as he could, though she whimpered when the leather touched her damaged skin. They were far too large for her, but they would do what needed doing. "Where did you come from?" he asked as he worked, trying to keep her conscious. "What are you doing out here?" Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Her teeth were chattering too hard for speech. Once the boots were secure, Nathan shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her into his arms. She was light enough that he barely felt the weight, though he knew that would change as he made his way back down the mountain. His cabin was 2 miles away, maybe less if he cut through the narrow pass, but those would be hard miles in his socks through snow that was knee-deep in places. "Stay awake," he told her, starting to walk. "I need you to stay awake. Can you do that for me?" She made a small sound that might have been agreement. Her head lolled against his chest, and he could feel how cold she was even through his thick wool shirt. Nathan had grown up in Kentucky, the youngest of 7 children, and had learned early how to be tough, because there was no other way to survive in a family where affection was rationed and food was scarce. He had left home at 16 and spent the next decade drifting west, working as a logger, a ranch hand, a freight hauler, anything that paid enough to keep him moving. He had seen men die in a dozen different ways, from falling trees to stampeding cattle to simple, stupid accidents. And he had learned not to get attached to anyone or anything, because loss was the only constant in a hard life. But something about the woman in his arms, this stranger who had almost died on his mountain, made him feel things he had not felt in years. Protective, angry at whoever had left her in this condition, determined to make sure she survived, no matter what it took. The walk back to his cabin seemed to take forever. His feet went numb after the first mile, and he knew he would be lucky if he did not lose a toe or two to frostbite himself. But he kept moving, one step after another, talking to her the whole time to keep her conscious. "My name is Nathan," he said. "Nathan Emerson. I have lived up here for 5 years now. Built my cabin with my own hands, every log and nail. It is not much, but it is warm and it is safe, and that is where we are going. You are going to be all right, I promise you that. I do not break my promises." She stirred in his arms, her eyes opening slightly. "Hurts," she whispered. "I know it does. That is actually a good sign, you hear me. If you can feel pain, that means you are alive. Dead people do not hurt." "Want to be dead," she murmured, and Nathan felt something twist in his chest. "No, you do not. Whatever happened to you, whatever brought you up here, it is not worth dying over. Nothing is worth that." "You do not know," she said, the words barely audible. "Then you are going to tell me once we get you warm and safe. You are going to tell me everything, and we are going to figure this out together." She did not respond to that, and he worried that she had lost consciousness. But when he looked down, he saw that her eyes were still open, just staring at nothing. By the time his cabin came into view, Nathan could not feel his feet at all. The small log structure sat in a clearing surrounded by pines, smoke rising from the chimney from the fire he had banked that morning before heading out to hunt. He had never been so grateful to see his own home. He kicked the door open and carried her inside, the warmth of the room hitting him like a physical force. His cabin was one large room with a loft for sleeping, dominated by a stone fireplace that he had spent 2 months building. There was a bed in the corner, a table with 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and hooks on the walls for his tools and gear. It was sparse and practical, the home of a man who needed little. Nathan laid her on the bed, which was covered with several layers of furs and blankets, then quickly built up the fire until it was roaring. He filled his largest pot with snow from outside and set it on the crane to heat, then turned his attention back to the woman. She was still shaking, curled into a ball on his bed, her eyes closed now. He needed to get her out of that wet dress and into something dry, but he hesitated, aware that she was a stranger and vulnerable, and that taking off her clothes without permission felt like a violation even if it was necessary to save her life. "Madam," he said, kneeling beside the bed, "I need to get you out of those wet things. Can you hear me? I am going to get you warm, but I need to remove that dress. Is that all right?" She did not respond, and Nathan made a decision. He would do what needed doing, but he would do it with as much respect as possible. He turned his back while he pulled off his own wet socks, his feet white and numb, then grabbed one of his clean wool shirts from the shelf. It would be like a nightgown on her, long enough to preserve her modesty. He turned back to the bed and carefully lifted her into a sitting position, then worked the wet dress over her head. She was wearing nothing underneath, and he could see bruises covering her ribs and back, dark purple marks that made his jaw clench. Someone had beaten her, and badly. He pulled his shirt over her head and worked her arms through the sleeves, trying not to look at her body more than necessary, then laid her back down and piled every blanket he owned on top of her. Her feet were the biggest concern. The frostbite was worse than he had thought, the skin white and hard on her toes and heels. Nathan had treated frostbite before, on himself and on others. The key was to warm the affected areas slowly, not quickly, because rapid warming could cause more damage. He dipped a cloth in the warming water and began to gently press it against her feet, changing it out for a fresh warm cloth every minute or so. She whimpered and tried to pull away, but he held her feet firmly. "I know it hurts. It is going to hurt worse before it gets better, but we have to do this. If we do not, you will lose your toes. Do you understand?" "Let me lose them," she whispered. "Let me die." "I already told you that is not going to happen, not while I am here. Now you can hate me for keeping you alive if you want, but you are going to stay alive to do it." For the next hour, Nathan worked on warming her feet, changing the water as it cooled, wrapping her in heated blankets, trying to get her core temperature back up. Slowly, gradually, color began to return to her skin. Her shaking eased. Her breathing steadied. He made strong tea from his stores and added honey and whiskey, then helped her sit up enough to drink it. She coughed and sputtered, but she got most of it down. "What is your name?" he asked when the cup was empty. She looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she whispered, "Penelope, Penelope Zimmerman." "Well, Penelope Zimmerman, you are safe now. Whatever you are running from, whoever hurt you, they cannot touch you here. You have my word on that." Her eyes filled with tears. "You do not know what you are saying. You do not know what they will do." "Then tell me." She turned her face away. "I cannot." Nathan sat back on his heels, studying her. She was pretty, he realized, even with the bruises and the exhaustion and the fear that seemed to radiate from her like heat. There was something fierce in her face, a strength that had kept her walking through the snow even when most people would have laid down and given up. "All right," he said. "You do not have to tell me anything right now. Right now you just need to rest and get warm. We can worry about everything else later." He moved away from the bed, giving her space, and began to prepare food. His stores were simple but sufficient: dried venison, beans, flour, cornmeal, coffee, salt, sugar. He had shot a rabbit 2 days ago and still had most of it left, so he made a stew with root vegetables from his cold cellar and fresh snow water, letting it simmer over the fire until the smell filled the cabin. While the stew cooked, he examined his own feet. They were red and painful but not frostbitten, though it had been a close thing. He sat near the fire and massaged them slowly, working feeling back into them, grateful that he had been lucky. When he looked over at the bed, he found Penelope watching him. Some of the glaze had left her eyes, replaced by wariness and confusion. "Why did you help me?" she asked. Nathan shrugged. "What else was I supposed to do? Leave you out there to die? Most people would have. Then I guess I am not most people." She studied him, her gaze traveling over his broad shoulders and muscular arms, the length of his hair, the beard that covered half his face. "You are a mountain man," she said, and it was not quite a question. "I suppose I am. I trap some, hunt more, trade with the town when I need supplies I cannot make myself. It is a good life, mostly. Lonely, though. I prefer it that way." "Why?" Nathan stirred the stew, not answering right away. It was not a question he got asked often, mostly because he did not spend time around people who asked personal questions. "People are complicated," he finally said. "They want things from you. They expect things. Up here, the only expectations are the ones I put on myself." "That sounds lonely," Penelope said softly. "Maybe, but it is honest. A mountain does not lie to you. A tree does not pretend to be something it is not. No, they just are what they are, exactly." He ladled stew into a wooden bowl and brought it to her, helping her sit up against the wall. She took the bowl with shaking hands and ate slowly, each spoonful seeming to require great concentration. "How long were you walking out there?" Nathan asked, settling into one of his chairs with his own bowl. "I do not know. Since yesterday morning, I think. I lost track of time." "Where did you come from?" Her hands tightened on the bowl. "A place I can never go back to." "Beaver," she nodded slowly, "and someone there hurt you." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." Nathan waited, letting the silence stretch, giving her space to say more if she wanted to. When she did not, he let it go. "How are your feet feeling?" "Like they are on fire." "That is good. Means the blood is flowing again." "You might lose a toenail or two, but I think we got to you in time to save the toes themselves." "You gave me your boots," she said, as if just remembering, "and carried me all the way here in your socks. You could have lost your own feet, but I did not." "Why did you do that?" "You do not even know me." Nathan met her eyes. "Because it was the right thing to do. Because I could not live with myself if I had let you die when I could have saved you. Because nobody should have to walk barefoot through the snow, no matter what they have done or where they came from." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she looked away quickly, as if ashamed of them. "I do not deserve your kindness. That is not for you to decide." They ate in silence after that, and when Penelope's bowl was empty, Nathan took it from her and settled her back down under the blankets. She was asleep within minutes, exhausted beyond words. Nathan sat by the fire and stared into the flames, thinking about the woman in his bed and the bruises on her body, and the look in her eyes that said she had been through something terrible. He thought about the way she had walked into the wilderness to die rather than face whatever she was running from. He thought about his own life, his chosen solitude, and wondered if maybe he had been alone for too long, if his first instinct upon finding a half-frozen woman was to feel something that might have been hope. The next few days established a routine. Nathan slept in his loft while Penelope recovered in his bed. He changed the bandages on her feet, which were healing slowly but steadily. He cooked meals and made sure she ate every bite. He kept the fire going and the cabin warm, and tried not to think about how comfortable it felt to have another person sharing his space. Penelope was quiet and watchful, her eyes tracking his movements whenever he was in the room. She did not talk much about herself, and Nathan did not push. But gradually, in small pieces, her story began to emerge. She had come to Beaver 6 months ago with her husband, a man named Richard, who had promised her a new life in the West. What he had not told her was that his idea of a new life involved drinking away what little money they had and taking his frustrations out on her with his fists. The bruises Nathan had seen were just the latest in a long line of beatings. "He would be sorry afterward," Penelope said one evening as they sat by the fire, her voice flat and emotionless. "He would cry and promise it would never happen again. And I would believe him because what else could I do? I had no money, no family, nowhere to go." "But you left anyway," Nathan said. "I was going to die if I stayed. I knew that. The last time he choked me until I blacked out. When I woke up, he was passed out drunk on the floor. I just walked out the door and kept walking. I did not even take a coat. I just had to get away." "He should be horsewhipped," Nathan said, his voice hard. Penelope looked at him with something that might have been surprise. "Most men would say a husband has a right to discipline his wife. Most men are idiots. Nobody has the right to hurt another person like that." "I do not care what the law says or what the church preaches. It is wrong. Something shifted in her expression, a softening around her eyes. "You are a strange man, Nathan Emerson, so I have been told. I mean that as a compliment. I will take it as one then." As Penelope grew stronger, she began to help around the cabin. She washed dishes and swept floors and mended his clothes, which desperately needed mending. She was a good cook, better than him, and the simple meals he was used to became more elaborate under her care. She had a way with herbs and spices that made even dried venison taste like something special. Nathan found himself looking forward to coming back to the cabin after his daily work. There was something deeply satisfying about opening the door to warmth and good smells and the sight of Penelope sitting by the fire, her dark hair catching the light. She smiled more now, and when she did her whole face transformed, becoming luminous. He was falling for her. He knew it and could not seem to stop it, even though he knew it was probably a terrible idea. She was married, for one thing, even if her husband was a monster, and she had been through trauma that he could not fully understand. The last thing she needed was another man trying to claim her. But the heart wanted what it wanted, and Nathan's heart wanted Penelope Zimmerman with an intensity that surprised him. One evening about 2 weeks after he had found her, Penelope looked up from the shirt she was mending and said, "He will be looking for me, you know. Richard. He will not just let me go." Nathan, who had been oiling his rifle, paused. "Let him look. He will not find you up here. You do not know him. He is mean when he is angry, and he will be very angry about this. If he finds me, he will kill me, and probably you too for sheltering me. I would like to see him try." Penelope set down the mending, her expression serious. "I should leave. I should not have stayed this long. I am putting you in danger." "You are not going anywhere," Nathan said flatly. "Your feet are barely healed and there is a storm coming. I can smell it in the air. Besides, where would you go? I do not know. Somewhere far from here, California maybe, or Oregon, somewhere he would never find me. And how exactly would you get there with no money and no supplies?" She looked down at her hands. "I would figure something out." Nathan set down his rifle and moved to sit beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Penelope, listen to me. You are not a burden. You are not putting me in danger that I cannot handle. And you are not leaving until you are ready, until you are healed and strong and have a real plan for what comes next. All right." She looked up at him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Why are you being so kind to me? What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I want nothing from you except for you to be safe and happy. Is that so hard to believe?" "Yes," she whispered. "In my experience, everyone wants something." Nathan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and he felt her lean into the touch just slightly. "Then maybe it is time you had a different experience." The moment stretched between them, charged with something electric. Nathan could hear his own heartbeat, loud in his ears, and see the rapid rise and fall of Penelope's chest. He wanted to kiss her more than he had ever wanted anything, but he held back, afraid of pushing too hard, too fast. Penelope broke the moment by looking away, her cheeks flushed. "I should finish this mending." "All right," Nathan said, moving back to give her space, even though it was the last thing he wanted to do. The storm he had predicted hit 2 days later. A howling blizzard that buried the cabin under 3 feet of snow and made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. They were trapped inside together, and Nathan found himself grateful for it, even as he worried about his ability to control his growing feelings. They passed the time playing cards with a worn deck Nathan had owned for years, telling stories about their lives, reading aloud from the few books he owned. Penelope had a beautiful voice, clear and expressive, and listening to her read poetry by firelight became Nathan's favorite part of each day. "Where did you learn to read like that?" he asked one evening after she had finished a particularly moving piece. "My mother taught me. She was educated, which was unusual for a woman of her generation. She believed that knowledge was power and that women needed all the power they could get in this world. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. She died when I was 16. Consumption. My father followed her a year later. I think he died of a broken heart as much as anything else." "I am sorry." Penelope closed the book gently. "That is when I met Richard. I was alone and scared and had no idea how to take care of myself. He seemed so charming, so strong. He promised to take care of me and I believed him. You were young. I was stupid. No, you were human. We all make mistakes when we are trying to survive." She looked at him with such gratitude that it made his chest ache. "How is it that you understand these things? Most men would judge me. I have made my own share of mistakes. Who am I to judge anyone else?" The days blended together, and Nathan realized he had never been happier than he was snowbound in his cabin with Penelope. They moved around each other with an ease that felt natural, as if they had been living together for years instead of weeks. She anticipated his needs and he anticipated hers, and there was a harmony to it that Nathan had never experienced with another person. But underneath the comfort, there was tension. Every accidental touch sent electricity through Nathan's body. Every time their eyes met across the cabin, he saw his own desire reflected back at him. The air between them felt heavy with unspoken words and unfulfilled longing. One night, Nathan woke from a nightmare to the sound of Penelope crying. He climbed down from the loft to find her sitting by the dying fire, her knees drawn up to her chest, tears streaming down her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, kneeling beside her. "I dreamed about him. Richard. He found me and he was dragging me back and you could not stop him and I was screaming but no sound came out." She was shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. Nathan did not think, just pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she cried against his chest. He stroked her hair and murmured soothing words and felt her gradually calm in his embrace. "He will never hurt you again," Nathan said fiercely. "I swear it on my life. If he comes here, he will have to go through me, and I promise you, Penelope, he will not make it." She looked up at him, her face wet with tears, and something shifted in her expression. "Nathan," she whispered, and then she kissed him. For a moment, Nathan was too surprised to respond. Then every bit of restraint he had been holding on to for weeks shattered, and he kissed her back with all the pent-up longing he had been fighting. She tasted like salt and honey, and something indefinably sweet, and he could not get enough. They broke apart, both breathing hard, and Nathan forced himself to pull back. "We should not," he said, his voice rough. "You are married, and you have been through so much. I do not want to take advantage." "You are not taking advantage," Penelope said, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I want this. I want you. Please, Nathan. Make me forget everything else, even if just for tonight. Penelope, please." He was lost then, drowning in the need in her eyes and his own overwhelming desire. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and felt her melt against him. They made love there by the fire, tender and fierce and desperate, and Nathan felt something fundamental shift inside him. This woman in his arms, this brave, broken, beautiful woman, she was his. He knew it with the same certainty that he knew the sun would rise tomorrow. Afterward, they lay tangled together in blankets pulled from the bed, the fire casting dancing shadows across their skin. Penelope traced patterns on Nathan's chest, her head tucked under his chin. "I am still married," she said quietly. "That does not change anything legally." "I do not care about legal. I care about what is right. And what is right is you being with someone who treats you the way you deserve to be treated. Richard will never give me a divorce, and even if he did, it would be a scandal. A divorced woman has no place in society. Then we will make our own place, up here, away from society and its judgments. You and me, Penelope, that is all we need. She was quiet for a long moment. Do you mean that? I have never meant anything more in my life. She turned to look up at him, her eyes shining. I love you, Nathan Emerson. I think I have loved you since the moment you gave me your boots and carried me through the snow. No one has ever taken care of me the way you do. No one has ever made me feel safe. I love you too, Nathan said, the words feeling both strange and absolutely right in his mouth. I will spend the rest of my life keeping you safe if you will let me. Yes, she whispered. Yes. The storm broke 3 days later, leaving the world buried under snow that sparkled like diamonds in the morning sun. Nathan spent the day digging out the cabin and checking his trap lines while Penelope made bread and soup and sang to herself as she worked. When he came back inside, cold and exhausted, she greeted him with a kiss that warmed him better than any fire, but their peace could not last forever. 2 weeks after the storm, Nathan was chopping wood outside the cabin when he heard horses approaching. He set down his axe and walked around the side of the cabin to see 3 men riding up the trail, moving slowly through the deep snow. The man in front was small and wiry, with a weak chin and mean eyes. Nathan knew instantly that this was Richard Zimmerman, even before the man spotted him and his face twisted with rage. You, Richard shouted, spurring his horse forward. Where is she? Where is my wife? Nathan stood his ground, his hand resting casually on the knife at his belt. The 2 men with Richard looked uncomfortable, as if they had been dragged into something they wanted no part of. I do not know what you are talking about, Nathan said calmly. Do not lie to me. I know she is here. I have been searching for weeks, asking everyone in town if they had seen a woman matching her description. Finally, someone mentioned the crazy mountain man who lives up here alone. I knew she would have run to the first man who showed her any kindness. Richard's voice dripped with contempt. Where is she? Even if I knew where your wife was, which I am not saying I do, why would I tell you? So you can beat her some more, so you can finish what you started. Richard's face went purple. What happens between a man and his wife is none of your business. She belongs to me, and I have every legal right to take her home. She does not belong to anyone. She is a person, not property. The law says differently. Richard dismounted, his hand going to the gun at his hip. Now bring her out here, or I will burn your cabin down with both of you inside. Nathan heard the cabin door open behind him and cursed internally. He had hoped Penelope would stay hidden, but he should have known better. She was too strong to cower. Richard, Penelope said, her voice steady despite the fear Nathan could see in her eyes. Go home. This does not have to end badly. You are right about that, Richard said, his tone turning wheedling. Just come with me now, Penny. I forgive you for running. I know you were confused, but everything will be better now, I promise. I will never hurt you again. You said that last time. And the time before that, I do not believe you anymore. Richard's expression hardened. I was not asking. You are my wife and you are coming home. Now get over here. No. The word hung in the cold air like a challenge. Richard's hand tightened on his gun and Nathan moved before he could think, putting himself between Richard and Penelope. You are not taking her anywhere, Nathan said, his voice low and dangerous. Now get off my mountain before I make you leave. You have no authority here, Richard snarled. I will have the sheriff up here. Have you arrested for kidnapping and alienation of affection. Good luck getting the sheriff to ride up here in winter. And even if you do, all I have to do is show him the bruises on Penelope's body. The marks you put there. What do you think he will say about that? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Richard's face. The two men with him were looking decidedly uncomfortable now, and one of them cleared his throat. "Richard, maybe we should just go back to town," he said. "This is getting out of hand." "Shut up," Richard snapped. "This is not your concern. Actually, it is my concern if you are planning to commit murder, which is what it looks like you are planning." Richard's hand was shaking on his gun now, fury and fear warring in his face. Nathan could see him calculating his chances, trying to decide if he was fast enough to draw and shoot before Nathan reached him. "Do not do it," Nathan said quietly. "I have killed men before, killed them with my hands and my knife and my gun. I have no problem adding you to that list if you threaten Penelope." The moment stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Richard's hand dropped away from his gun, and Nathan saw defeat in his eyes mixed with impotent rage. "This is not over," Richard said. "I will be back with the law, you hear me?" "This is not over." "Yes, it is," Penelope said, stepping out from behind Nathan. "I am never coming back to you, Richard. You can bring the sheriff or the army or God himself, and it will not change my mind. I would rather die than spend another day as your wife." Richard stared at her, his face working through a dozen different emotions. Finally, he spat in the snow at Nathan's feet, mounted his horse, and rode away without another word. The two men with him followed quickly, clearly relieved to be leaving. Nathan and Penelope stood together in the snow, watching until the riders disappeared into the trees. Then Penelope collapsed, her legs giving out, and Nathan caught her and held her while she shook. "It is over," he murmured into her hair. "He is gone. You are safe." "He will come back," she whispered. "You heard him. He will bring the law. Then we will deal with it when the time comes. But Penelope, I meant what I said. I will not let him take you. I will not let anyone hurt you ever again." She looked up at him, her eyes full of tears but also full of trust. "I know, I believe you." They went back inside the cabin, and Nathan barred the door and checked his weapons. He did not think Richard would come back tonight, but he was not taking any chances. He loaded his rifle and his pistol and placed them within easy reach, then built up the fire and made tea for Penelope, who was still shaking. "What are we going to do?" she asked as they sat by the fire. "We are going to stay right here and live our lives. Richard is a coward. He will not come back alone, and I doubt he will find anyone willing to ride up here with him. Not in winter, and not for a domestic dispute that most people would rather stay out of. But I am still legally his wife. Not forever. We will figure something out. Maybe we can go to California in the spring, start fresh where no one knows us. Or maybe Richard will drink himself to death and solve the problem for us. Either way, we are together, and that is what matters." Penelope nodded slowly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "Together," she repeated. "I like the sound of that." The winter wore on, and Richard did not return. Nathan made a few trips down to Beaver for supplies and came back with the news that Richard had been making noise about bringing the sheriff up the mountain, but had not actually done it. The sheriff, for his part, seemed uninterested in getting involved in a marital dispute, especially one that would require a dangerous winter trek. "Most folks seem to think you are better off without him," Nathan told Penelope after one such trip. "There is a general understanding that Richard was not a good husband, even if people will not say it out loud. That does not make me any less married to him. No, but it means we have time to figure things out." They settled into a comfortable domesticity that felt more real than any legal marriage. Penelope was Nathan's in every way that mattered, and he was hers. They worked side by side, lived side by side, loved each other with an intensity that never seemed to fade. Spring came slowly to the mountains, the snow melting in patches to reveal the green beneath. The creek that ran near Nathan's cabin swelled with runoff, and the forest came alive with birdsong. Nathan taught Penelope to shoot and to fish and to identify edible plants, all the skills she would need to survive in this wild place. She was a quick learner and seemed to thrive in the solitude that Nathan had loved for so long. She had a talent for watching wildlife, sitting motionless for hours just to observe the deer and elk and occasional bear that wandered past the cabin. She found beauty in things Nathan had stopped noticing, and through her eyes he learned to see his mountain home with fresh wonder. One evening in late April, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the peaks, Penelope said, "I think I might be pregnant." Nathan's head whipped around so fast he nearly hurt his neck. "You think? I am late, 3 weeks late, and I have been feeling strange in the mornings." She placed a hand on her stomach, her expression uncertain. "Are you angry?" "Angry? Penelope, why would I be angry? Because we are not married. Because a child complicates everything." Nathan pulled her into his arms, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "I am not angry, I am happy. Happier than I have any right to be. A child, Penelope, our child." She searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her relax. "You really mean that?" "I mean it. I know it will not be easy, and I know there will be people who judge us, but I do not care about any of that. You are my family now. You and this baby. That is all that matters." They were married in their own way that night, under the stars, with no witnesses except the mountains and the wind. Nathan spoke vows that came from his heart, promises to love and protect and cherish Penelope and their child for as long as he drew breath. She spoke her own vows, her voice clear and strong, and when they kissed it felt as sacred as any church ceremony. The pregnancy progressed, and Penelope bloomed. She grew round and radiant, and Nathan marveled at the changes in her body, the visible proof of the life they had created together. He built a cradle from pine wood, carving it with careful precision, and Penelope sewed tiny clothes from fabric she ordered from the general store in Beaver. They had not heard anything from Richard in months, and Nathan dared to hope that maybe the man had finally given up. Then one day in early July, when Penelope was 8 months pregnant and moving with the careful waddle of a woman who was very ready to not be pregnant anymore, Nathan came back from checking his traps to find Richard sitting on his porch. Nathan's hand went to his gun, but Richard held up his hands in a gesture of peace. He looked terrible, thin and haggard, with the broken, veined nose of a heavy drinker. "I am not here to cause trouble," Richard said. "I just want to talk." "Talk fast," Nathan said, not lowering his gun. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past months. About Penny, about our marriage, about everything." Richard rubbed his face tiredly. "I know I was a terrible husband. I know I hurt her, and I have no excuse for it. The drinking, the anger, none of it justifies what I did. No, it does not. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. But I came here to tell you that I am leaving, going to California to try to start over. Before I go, I wanted to give Penny something." Richard reached into his coat and Nathan tensed, but the man just pulled out a folded paper. "Divorce papers," Richard said. "I had a lawyer draw them up in Salt Lake City. I already signed them. All Penny needs to do is sign and it will be final. She will be free of me." Nathan stared at the papers, hardly daring to believe it. "Why?" "Because I owe her that much. Because she deserves to be happy, and she clearly never was with me." Richard looked toward the cabin where Penelope had appeared in the doorway, her hand protectively on her swollen belly. Something painful crossed his face. "Take care of her. She deserves someone who will take care of her." "I will," Nathan said. "Every day for the rest of my life." Richard nodded, handed over the papers, and walked away. They watched him mount his horse and ride down the mountain, and this time Nathan knew they would never see him again. Penelope signed the divorce papers that same day, her signature shaky but determined. Nathan rode down to Beaver the next morning and filed them with the territorial courthouse. And just like that, Penelope was free. They were married for real 3 days later, in a simple ceremony at the church in Beaver with the preacher and 2 witnesses from town. Penelope wore a simple blue dress that Nathan had bought for her, and she had never looked more beautiful. Nathan wore his cleanest clothes and his best boots, and he felt like the luckiest man alive when he slipped a gold ring onto Penelope's finger. "I love you, Mrs. Emerson," he said, after the preacher pronounced them husband and wife. "I love you too," she replied, and kissed him while the witnesses applauded. They returned to the cabin that evening as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Nathan carried Penelope over the threshold, careful of her pregnant belly, and set her down gently beside the fire. "We are really married," she said, staring at the ring on her finger as if she still could not quite believe it. "We are, and in about a month we are going to be parents." "Are you scared?" "Terrified," she admitted, "but also excited. I think that is normal." "I am terrified too. I do not know the first thing about being a father. You will be wonderful. You are the best man I have ever known." Nathan pulled her close as her belly would allow, and rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this, making sure you are happy and safe and loved." "I already am all of those things," Penelope said. "You saved my life, Nathan. In every way a person can be saved, and I am going to spend my life loving you for it." Their son was born on a hot August afternoon, screaming his way into the world with impressive lung power. Nathan delivered him, following the instructions from the medical book he had ridden to Salt Lake City to buy, his hands shaking but steady when they needed to be. When he placed the baby in Penelope's arms and saw the look of absolute wonder on her face, he felt tears stream down his own cheeks. "He is perfect," Penelope whispered, touching the baby's tiny fingers. "He is. What should we call him?" They had discussed names for months but had never quite decided. Now, looking at their son's red, angry little face, Penelope smiled. "Noah," she said. "Noah Emerson. It means rest and comfort. That is what you gave me when I was lost. Rest and comfort and love." "Noah," Nathan repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Hello, Noah. Welcome to the family." The first few months of parenthood were exhausting and overwhelming and absolutely wonderful. Noah was a colicky baby who seemed to prefer screaming to sleeping, and Nathan and Penelope took turns walking him around the cabin at all hours of the night. But even when he was exhausted beyond words, Nathan found himself marveling at the tiny human they had created. Penelope was a natural mother, patient and loving even when Noah was at his most difficult. She sang to him constantly, lullabies and folk songs, and made up tunes, and gradually Noah began to settle. By the time winter arrived again, he was sleeping through the night more often than not, and his cries had turned to gurgles and coos. Nathan expanded the cabin that spring, adding a second room for Noah and building a proper kitchen with a real stove that he had hauled up the mountain piece by piece. They planted a garden, and Penelope proved to have a gift for making things grow. Soon they had fresh vegetables to supplement Nathan's hunting and trapping. Life fell into a rhythm that felt right. Nathan provided for his family through his work, and Penelope made their cabin into a home. Noah grew from infant to toddler, walking and talking and getting into everything with the boundless curiosity of childhood. He had his mother's dark eyes and his father's broad build, and Nathan could already see that he was going to be tall. When Noah was 3, Penelope told Nathan she was pregnant again. This time it was a girl, born in the spring with flowers blooming all around the cabin. They named her Iris, and she was as calm and placid as Noah had been fussy. She spent her days watching the world with serious gray eyes, and she rarely cried. 2 children changed the dynamics of the family, but in good ways. Noah was protective of his little sister, and Iris adored her big brother. They played together for hours while Penelope tended the garden and Nathan worked, their laughter filling the mountain air. Nathan and Penelope had 2 more children over the years, another boy they named Daniel, and then finally a daughter named Rose. The cabin grew with their family, expanding bit by bit, until it was a proper house with multiple rooms and a porch that wrapped around 3 sides. They went to town more often as the children grew, for supplies and for church and occasionally for social events. People in Beaver had long since accepted Nathan and Penelope's story, and if there were those who disapproved of their unconventional beginning, they kept their opinions to themselves. The Emerson family was respected, Nathan for his skill and hard work, Penelope for her kindness and strength. The years passed, marked by seasons and birthdays and the gradual changes that come to every family. Noah grew into a young man, tall and strong like his father, with a quiet confidence that made people listen when he spoke. Iris developed a talent for drawing, filling page after page with sketches of the mountains and forests around their home. Daniel was the wild one, always climbing trees and exploring caves, and coming home with scraped knees and fantastic stories. Rose, the baby, was everyone's favorite, sweet-tempered and affectionate, always ready with a hug or a kind word. Through it all, Nathan and Penelope's love never wavered. If anything, it grew stronger with time, deepened by shared experiences and the family they had built together. They still sat together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the peaks, and Nathan still marveled that this was his life. A wife he adored, children he cherished, a home carved from wilderness through hard work and determination. "You ever regret it?" Penelope asked one such evening when the children were all in bed and they had the world to themselves. "Giving up your solitude, your simple life?" Nathan pulled her closer, his arm around her shoulders. "Never, not for a single second. You gave me something I did not even know I was missing. Purpose, family, love. I was just existing before I found you. Now I am actually living." "I think about that day sometimes," Penelope said softly. "Walking barefoot through the snow, so cold I could not feel my feet anymore, sure I was going to die. And then you appeared, like something out of a dream. You gave me your boots and carried me to safety, but more than that, you gave me hope. You gave me a reason to keep living." "We saved each other," Nathan said. "I was half frozen too, just in a different way. Frozen inside, shutting myself off from the world because it was easier than risking getting hurt. You thawed me out. Good, I like you thawed." Nathan laughed and kissed the top of her head. "I like me thawed too." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the forest. An owl hooted somewhere in the trees. The creek babbled over stones. Inside the house, one of the children coughed in their sleep, and both Nathan and Penelope tensed, listening, but the sound did not repeat. "They are all growing up so fast," Penelope said. "Noah will be getting married in a few years, I expect. He has been making eyes at the baker's daughter in town." "I noticed that. She seems like a nice girl." "She is. They would be good together." Penelope paused. "Does it make you feel old thinking about becoming a grandfather?" "A little. But mostly it makes me feel grateful. Grateful that I lived long enough to see it. Grateful that we built something that will continue after we are gone. We did build something, did not we? Something real and lasting. We did. And I am proud of it. Proud of our children. Proud of this life we made. But mostly I am just proud of you, Penelope, for surviving what you survived, for being strong enough to walk away from a bad situation, even if it meant walking barefoot through the snow. for taking a chance on a strange mountain man who did not know how to talk to people. Penelope turned to look at him, her eyes shining with tears. I would do it all again. Every cold step, every painful moment, if I knew it would lead me back to you. I love you, Nathan said. More than I ever thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too. Always. They kissed as the stars came out overhead, a long, slow kiss that held 20 years of shared history. When they finally broke apart, they went inside together, hand in hand, to the home they had built and the family they had created, and the life they had earned through courage and love and sheer stubborn determination. Years continued to pass, bringing changes both joyful and sorrowful. Noah did indeed marry the baker's daughter, a sweet woman named Elizabeth, and they had 3 children of their own. Iris fell in love with a traveling artist who came through Beaver one summer, and after a whirlwind courtship, she married him and moved to Denver, though she visited often. Daniel became a ranger, patrolling the wilderness that his father had taught him to love and respect. Rose, the baby, surprised everyone by announcing her intention to become a teacher, and she opened a small school in Beaver that served the children of the growing town. Nathan and Penelope became grandparents 7 times over, and their house was always full of laughter and chaos when the whole family gathered for holidays and birthdays. Nathan taught his grandchildren the same skills he had taught his children: how to track and hunt and fish and live off the land. Penelope taught them to raid and to cook, and to appreciate the beauty in small things. They grew old together, Nathan's dark hair turning silver, his powerful frame becoming leaner but no less strong. Penelope's face gained lines around her eyes and mouth, laugh lines earned through years of smiling. But when Nathan looked at her, he still saw the woman he had found barefoot in the snow, brave and broken and beautiful. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party in town. Half of Beaver turned out to celebrate, and there were speeches and toasts, and enough food to feed an army. Noah stood up and told the story of how his parents met, embellishing it until Nathan hardly recognized it, turning it into a grand romance for the ages. "My father saw a woman in need and did not hesitate," Noah said, raising his glass. "He gave her his boots, carried her through miles of snow, and saved her life. But really, they saved each other. They built a life together from nothing, carved a home out of wilderness, and showed all of us what real love looks like." To Nathan and Penelope Emerson, the finest parents anyone could ask for. To Nathan and Penelope, the crowd echoed, glasses raised high. Later that evening, when they were finally alone in their bedroom, Penelope turned to Nathan with a mischievous smile. "A grand romance for the ages." "Is that what we are? I think we might be," Nathan admitted. "Though it did not feel grand at the time, it just felt necessary. The best romances usually do." Penelope took his hand, her fingers threading through his. "I have been thinking about that day a lot lately. January 12th, 1878. The day you saved my life." "The day you saved mine," Nathan corrected. "The day we found each other," Penelope compromised. "I was so lost, Nathan, so broken. I had given up on everything, including myself. And then there you were, this giant of a man with kind eyes, giving me your boots like it was the most natural thing in the world." "It was the most natural thing in the world. How could I not? Most people would have. But you did not. You carried me home and you healed me and you loved me back to life. Do you know what a gift that is? To be loved back to life." Nathan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I do know, because you did the same for me. I was alive before I met you, but I was not really living. You taught me how to do that." They held each other in the darkness, 2 people who had weathered storms and built something beautiful from the wreckage of their pasts. Outside, The wind sang through the pines, the same wind that had howled through the mountains on the day they met. But inside, all was warm and safe and full of love. Nathan and Penelope lived another 15 years after that anniversary. Years filled with more grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with quiet mornings and peaceful evenings, with all the small joys and sorrows that make up a life. Nathan's body eventually began to fail him, his strong muscles weakening, his steps becoming slower and more careful. But his mind stayed sharp, and his love for Penelope never dimmed. He died on a spring morning, with Penelope holding his hand and all their children gathered around his bed. His last words were to her, whispered so quietly that only she could hear them. "Thank you for letting me love you. It was the greatest privilege of my life." Penelope held his hand long after he was gone, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. She had lost her first husband without shedding a tear, but Nathan's death broke something in her that would never fully heal. He had been her rock, her safe harbor, her great love. She lived another 2 years after Nathan's death, cared for by her children but never quite the same without her husband by her side. She spent her days sitting on the porch they had built together, looking out at the mountains they had loved, remembering the life they had shared. When Penelope died peacefully in her sleep one October night, her family buried her beside Nathan on the hillside overlooking their cabin. Rose, who had a gift with words, wrote the epitaph for their shared headstone. Nathan and Penelope Emerson, he gave her his boots and carried her home. She gave him her heart and made him whole together forever in the mountains they loved years later. Their grandchildren would tell the story to their own children, and those children would tell it to theirs, until it became part of the family lore, passed down through generations. The story of how a mountain man found a woman walking barefoot in the snow and saved her life by giving her his boots and carrying her to safety. How that simple act of kindness bloomed into a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The cabin still stood on the mountain, maintained by the family as a testament to Nathan and Penelope's legacy. People would come to visit it, to see the home that had been carved from wilderness through love and hard work and determination. They would stand on the porch and look out at the view, and they would understand why two people had chosen to build their lives in this wild, beautiful place. Because sometimes salvation comes in unexpected forms. Sometimes it comes in the form of a stranger willing to give you the boots off his feet and carry you through the snow to safety. Sometimes it comes in the form of a second chance, a new beginning, a love that heals old wounds and makes you whole again. Nathan and Penelope had found that salvation in each other, and they had built a life together that was rich and full and meaningful. They had raised children who became good people, who passed on the values of kindness and courage and compassion that their parents had embodied. They had loved each other through good times and bad, through struggles and triumphs with a devotion that never wavered. And in the end, that was what mattered. Not the hardships they had overcome or the obstacles they had faced, but the love they had shared and the family they had created and the legacy they had left behind. A legacy that would endure for generations, reminding people that even in the darkest moments hope could be found. That even when you were walking barefoot through the snow, certain you were going to die, salvation might be just around the corner in the form of someone brave enough to care. The mountain stood eternal, witness to countless human stories of love and loss and survival. But among all those stories, Nathan and Penelope's shone particularly bright, a testament to the transformative power of compassion and the enduring strength of love. They had found each other when both of them were lost, and together they had found their way home. And that home, built from nothing but determination and devotion, had become a beacon for everyone who came after, proof that even the most broken people could heal if they found the right person to love them. The wind still sang through the pines around the cabin, carrying with it the echoes of laughter and love that had filled that place for so many years. And on cold winter nights, when the snow fell thick and soft around the mountains, people swore they could sometimes see two figures on the porch, sitting close together, watching the sunset just like they had done for 30 years. Nathan and Penelope, together still, their love too strong to be contained by something as simple as death. Their story lived on, passed from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild, a reminder that heroism did not always come with grand gestures or dramatic proclamations. Sometimes it was as simple as giving someone your boots and carrying them home. Sometimes it was as profound as loving someone so completely that you healed all their broken places and made them whole again. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, you found someone who would do the same for you, and together you built something beautiful that would last long after you were gone. Nathan and Penelope Emerson had been that lucky. They had found each other against all odds, had loved each other through every challenge, and had created a legacy that would endure for generations. Their story was the best kind of love story, the kind that started with a simple act of kindness and bloomed into something extraordinary. The kind that proved that love really could conquer all, if you were brave enough to reach for it and strong enough to hold on. And so their story ended as it had begun, in the mountains they loved, surrounded by the family they had created, with their love as strong in death as it had been in life. Two souls who had found each other in the wilderness and had built something beautiful together, something that would never fade or diminish, but would continue to shine as an example of what love could be when it was real and true and deep. The end of their story was not an ending at all, but a beginning of a legacy that would continue through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, carried forward by everyone who heard their story and was inspired by it. Nathan and Penelope Emerson had lived well and loved deeply, and in the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. They had found each other, had saved each other, and had spent 30 beautiful years building a life together. And when they died, they did so knowing that their love would live on forever in the hearts of everyone they had touched, in the mountains outside Beaver, Utah, where the snow fell thick in winter and the wildflowers bloomed in spring. Their memory endured. A testament to love and courage, and the incredible power of one person choosing to help another in their darkest hour. Nathan had given Penelope his boots and carried her home, but in truth, they had carried each other through life, partners in every sense of the word, united by love that had conquered every obstacle and emerged stronger for it. And that, in the end, was the truest kind of love story. Not one without challenges or hardships, but one where two people faced those challenges together and came out the other side still holding hands. Nathan and Penelope had done that, and in doing so, they had created something that would last forever. A love that would never die, a story that would never end, a legacy that would inspire generations to come. They had found their happily ever after not in spite of their difficult beginning, but because of it. Because they had both known what it was to be lost and broken, and they had both been brave enough to help each other heal. The mountains remembered them, and the winds sang their story, and their family carried their legacy forward with pride. Nathan and Penelope Emerson, who had started with nothing but love and built an empire of devotion that would stand the test of time. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their love eternal. And in the quiet moments when the snow fell softly and the world grew still, you could almost hear them laughing together on the wind, still in love, still together, still home.